Please, ladies and gentlemen, if you found a box of condoms in your husband's briefcase, what would you do? For a moment, set aside the world's clamor and read these words slowly in the light of a small flame. The story I will tell you today begins with a box of condoms found in a husband's briefcase. Instead of causing a scene, I took a syringe and secretly injected sulfuric acid into each one. That night, I received an urgent call from the hospital emergency room. It's possible your husband and your sister-in-law may need lower limb amputation. Upon hearing this, my brother-in-law collapsed, losing consciousness instantly. When I opened Alexander's briefcase, that box of condoms jumped into view without warning. Durex, ultrafine, strawberry flavor. My fingers twitched as if they'd suffered an electric shock, but I forced them to stretch back toward the box. I carefully picked it up. The plastic wrapper reflected the cold light of the lamp, hurting my eyes. "Eleanor, where did you put my charger?" Alexander's voice came from the bedroom, accompanied by the busy sound of someone searching. "In the second drawer of the nightstand." My voice sounded surprisingly calm. At the same time, I quickly checked the manufacturing date of the condoms. They'd been produced last week. A freshly baked product. A bitter smile formed inside me. Alexander appeared in the living room dragging his slippers. In his impeccably ironed suit, he was the spitting image of what you might call an elite man. 35 years old, the age when a man is said to be most attractive, a well-maintained body, a neat appearance, and a moderately successful business. He was the type of man women would approach on their own initiative. "Are you packing my bag?" He glanced sideways at the briefcase in my hands, but his expression didn't change one bit. "Yes, you have your business trip to Los Angeles tomorrow, don't you?" With total nonchalance, I put the condoms back into the inner pocket of the briefcase and covered them with some wet wipes. "I put in some wipes just in case. It's hot there." "My wife is the best, without a doubt." He came closer and kissed me on the forehead. That routine kiss smelled of a cold, crisp lotion, like our 2 years of marriage, shiny on the outside, but inside cold and sharp as ice. Alexander went back to the bedroom to finish packing. I sat on the sofa watching my hands tremble uncontrollably. When was the last time we were intimate? 3 months ago or half a year? I didn't even remember anymore. If I approached him, he always pushed me away with the excuse of being tired from work. Over time, I lost interest too. Now I realized he wasn't tired. He simply wasn't interested in me. Mechanically, I headed to the kitchen and started preparing dinner. The rhythmic sound of the knife against the cutting board echoed. Bell peppers were cut into uniform strips. What repulsive hypocrisy. The perfect wife, the perfect home, the perfect marriage I had maintained for the last 5 years. My reflection appeared in the window next to the sink. 29 years old, and small wrinkles were already starting to show around my eyes. Hair tied in a casual ponytail, an apron stained with a few drops of oil. Suddenly, I remembered college. When Alexander was courting me, he called me his fairy and said my eyes held stars. Those stars had long since faded when he spent his first night away, when his phone password changed 3 times, when his shirt collar smelled of an unfamiliar perfume. If you're watching this video, please subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. During dinner, Alexander talked enthusiastically about a project he was about to close. I smiled, nodded, and occasionally put some food on his plate. We looked like any affectionate couple. Who could imagine that under the table, my nails were digging into the palm of my hand, leaving 4 blood-filled crescent marks? "I have a very early flight tomorrow. I think I'll go to sleep now," he said, setting down his silverware with a deliberately contrite tone. "Sure, go rest. I'll take care of the dishes," I replied like the model wife I was. Alexander went into the bathroom. I put on rubber gloves and started washing the dishes. The hot water hit the plates, creating foam. My mind was strangely clear. That box of condoms had lodged itself in my nerves like a thorn, a pain so deep it prevented me from thinking about anything else. I dried my hands and went to the storage room where I found a bottle of sulfuric acid I had bought to unclog the pipes. The clear liquid swayed faintly inside the glass bottle like a malevolent creature. In the medicine cabinet, I found a leftover used syringe. My hands were surprisingly steady. Alexander's briefcase was on the shoe rack by the entrance. I took out the box of condoms and carefully pierced a tiny hole in the side of each wrapper with the syringe needle. I injected a few drops of acid. The liquid was quickly absorbed, and the small hole in the wrapper was almost invisible. When I finished, I returned the condoms to their place and put everything away as if nothing had happened. Alexander came out of the shower, his hair still dripping. "You look tired. Aren't you overly exhausted?" he asked, glancing at me sideways. "A little, I guess." I forced a smile. "Go on, go to sleep. You have to get up early for your flight." He nodded and went to the bedroom. I stayed seated in the darkness of the living room, listening to the tick-tock of the wall clock. I didn't know what I was waiting for. Maybe an apology, an excuse, or at least a small sign of guilt, but there was nothing. 30 minutes later, I heard his steady breathing from the bedroom. Silently, I went into the office and turned on the computer. I accessed Alexander's cloud storage. The password was our wedding anniversary. He hadn't changed it in 5 years. Among countless work files, I found an encrypted folder. After several attempts, I entered AL180 and 9, and the folder opened. It was full of photos of Juliet, my sister-in-law, the wife of his brother Cyrus, married for 2 years. In the photos, Juliet posed seductively in hotel beds, dressed in provocative lingerie. Some had even been taken during family gatherings. In a corner, out of my and Cyrus's view, Alexander's hand audaciously circled her backside. The most recent photo was from last week. They were naked, embracing. The background was a hotel in Miami, the same one we stayed at on our honeymoon. I bit my lower lip until I tasted blood. They had chosen the place on purpose to humiliate me. I closed the computer and went out to the balcony to smoke a cigarette. A habit I had quit 3 years ago because Alexander didn't like it. The night wind was cold, and the smoke I exhaled quickly dissipated, like my last shred of affection for this marriage. At 2 in the morning, my cell phone rang, an unknown number. "Are you a relative of Alexander Montero?" a woman asked urgently. "I'm his wife. What's wrong?" "I'm calling from the emergency room at St. Jude's Hospital. Your husband and another patient have been admitted in serious condition. We need you to come immediately." "Another patient?" My voice seemed to come from very far away. "May I know who it is?" There was a silence on the other side. Amidst the noisy background, I vaguely heard a man yelling, crazed, "Alexander, you son of a bitch! How could you do this to me?" It was my brother-in-law, Cyrus's voice. "I believe her last name is Rivers," the nurse stammered. "Both have severe chemical burns on their lower bodies and require immediate surgery. I'm on my way." I hung up and calmly got dressed. I even put on light makeup. In the taxi to the hospital, I watched the neon lights pass and suddenly smiled. Those strawberry-flavored condoms, that was Juliet's favorite flavor. Whenever we had a family gathering, she brought strawberry cake with cream. Now they wouldn't have to worry about contraception anymore. The hospital corridor seemed endless. The smell of disinfectant hit my temples. There was a group of people in front of the emergency room. I instantly recognized Cyrus. He was being restrained by 2 security guards, struggling like a wild beast. His white shirt was splattered with blood. "Alexander, you bastard, get out now!" Cyrus's voice was completely broken. "How could you sleep with my wife? You're not human." I slowed down, controlled my breathing, and composed the appropriate expression of distress and confusion on my face. "Cyrus, what happened? And Alexander?" Cyrus abruptly turned his head. His bloodshot eyes looked at me as if I were a stranger. "Sister-in-law, didn't you know?" Suddenly, he let out a hysterical laugh. "Your husband and my wife, the 2 of them?" He couldn't finish the sentence. The veins in his forehead bulged as his whole body trembled. It was then that I saw his right fist was bloody. He must have hit something hard. "Are you Mr. Montero's relative?" A nurse approached. I nodded and followed her toward the emergency room. Behind me, I heard Cyrus's heart-wrenching cry. That sound should have hurt me, but at that moment, I only felt contempt. "Cyrus, you should have kept a better watch on your own wife." The emergency room was chaos. Behind a curtain, I heard Alexander's groans of pain and the doctor's hurried orders. The nurse opened the curtain to let me through. The nauseating smell of burnt flesh hit me. Alexander lay on the gurney. His face was pale, soaked in cold sweat. His pants had been cut off, and the inner side of his thighs was a horrible mass of blood and flesh. Several doctors were busy treating the wound. When he saw me, his pupils suddenly contracted. He moved his lips but said nothing. "The patient's lower body has been corroded by a highly acidic substance. He has severe burns on his penis and testicles. He requires immediate surgery, the chief doctor said without looking up. You are his wife, correct? Please sign the consent for the operation. I took the tablet and held my finger over the screen, pretending to hesitate. How could this have happened? What exactly occurred? Alexander's Adam's apple moved. Eleanor, can I explain? Explain what? Cyrus's furious shout erupted from outside the curtain. Explain that you were sleeping with my wife. Explain why you booked a hotel room. Silence! This is a hospital! A nurse yelled. I took a deep breath, signed the consent, and leaned toward Alexander. He instinctively flinched. His reaction seemed ridiculous to me. Don't worry, I whispered. Don't worry, I whispered, so low only he could hear me. Everything will be fine. The panic in his eyes was replaced by acute pain. A doctor was injecting him with a painkiller. The operation is high risk, the doctor said gravely. The area of corrosion is too extensive. We may have to remove a part. Remove? Which part? I opened my eyes wide. The penis, the doctor said, expressionless. We will try to save the testicles, but his function will be clearly affected. Alexander suddenly began to struggle. No, doctor, please, I can't. His voice was filled with a panic I had never heard from him before. Eleanor, tell them something. I'll give them all the money they want. I patted the back of his hand and addressed the doctor. Do everything you can. And again I whispered into Alexander's ear, with a voice only he could hear. Relax, you weren't using it for anything anyway. His pupils dilated for an instant, but the sedative began to take effect, and his eyelids slowly closed. I stood up, straightened my clothes, opened the curtain, and walked out. Cyrus was slumped in a chair in the hallway, his head in his hands. His suit jacket was gone. When he saw me, he lifted his head, eyes bloodshot. Sister-in-law, you already knew, didn't you? I sat next to him and sighed softly. If I had known, I wouldn't be reacting like this. Those words were half truth, half lie. I knew Alexander was cheating, but only that night had I confirmed it was with Juliet. This discovery added an unexpected pleasure to my revenge plan. I was killing two birds with one stone, getting rid of the Montero brothers all at once. They had booked a room at the palace. Cyrus's voice sounded hollow, like an empty cave. The hotel called me. They said someone was injured, that an ambulance had arrived. When I got there, his voice broke. Juliet had passed out from the pain, but even so, she was tightly clutching that box of condoms. I almost burst out laughing. What an ironic scene. That strawberry-flavored Durex was now the irrefutable proof of their adultery. The other patient is in the operating room. 3, and a nurse approached. We need a relative's signature, but her husband is not in a condition to sign. I'll go. I stood up and followed the nurse to another emergency room. There lay Juliet. Her pale face sank into the pillow, no trace of the radiant beauty she used to flaunt. A doctor was treating the wound between her legs, and the sheets were soaked with blood. The patient's vagina and cervix are severely damaged. We may have to perform a total hysterectomy, the doctor said concisely. I'm her sister-in-law, I replied calmly as I wrote my name on the consent form. The instant the tip of the pen scratched the paper, I felt a wave of electrifying pleasure. Juliet always boasted about being 5 years younger than me and therefore more fertile. Now she would never have to worry about contraception or motherhood again. Returning to the hallway, Cyrus was gone. The emergency room door burst open and a familiar figure ran in. It was my mother-in-law, Evelyn, the Montero matriarch. What in the world happened? Her shrill voice pierced the room. Where is Alexander? What happened to my son? She was wearing a branded tracksuit. Clearly, she had been pulled from her morning exercise session. At 55, she looked barely 50, and her favorite pastime was boasting about looking younger than her daughters-in-law. Mom, I approached. Alexander is in surgery. Eleanor. My mother-in-law grabbed my wrist tightly. Her nails dug into my skin. How is it that, as his wife, you're only finding out now that your husband is in this condition? That sentence ignited the anger I had suppressed for years. I pulled free from her grasp and forced a cold smile. Mom, did you expect me to serve him on a silver platter while your son was out doing other things? My mother-in-law was stunned. She hadn't expected such a response from her always submissive daughter-in-law. Her gaze scanned my face, trying to understand the situation. What exactly happened? Her tone softened a bit. Just as I was about to enter, the operating room door opened and a doctor came out. Relatives of Alexander Montero, yeah. The operation was a success. However, the damage was so severe that we had to remove a third of the tip of the penis. We saved the testicles, but his function? He looked at my mother-in-law and me and continued, "It will be very difficult for him to achieve a normal erection in the future. His reproductive capacity will also be severely diminished." My mother-in-law froze as if struck by lightning. Her face paled instantly. "What does that mean? Are you saying that my son has become impotent?" The doctor cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "It's not exactly that, but his sexual function will be seriously affected." Suddenly, my mother-in-law turned to me, her eyes spitting fire. "It's all your fault. Because you are useless and incapable of keeping your husband, Alexander had to look for another woman outside." The stares of the medical staff and other patients focused on us. I took a deep breath and at the precise moment let tears well up in my eyes, a technique I had perfected over 5 years to mastery. "Mom," my voice trembled, "Alexander was at the hotel with Cyrus's wife, with Juliet." My mother-in-law's expression was a sight to behold. First shock, then disbelief, and finally a grotesque grimace. She backed up a couple of steps, leaning on the wall and murmuring, "Impossible, Alexander wouldn't be that stupid." Just then the door to operating room 3 also opened, and another doctor came out. "Relatives of Juliet Rivers, the operation is over. We have completely removed the uterus, and vaginal reconstruction will be very complicated. It is likely that she will not be able to have sexual intercourse again." Cyrus, who had appeared out of nowhere, grabbed the doctor by the lapel and yelled, "What do you mean she won't be able to have sexual intercourse? What are you saying? She's only 28. "Calm down, please." The doctor pulled away from him. The corrosive liquid went directly into the vagina, and the tissue necrosis was too severe. I watched the drama with cold eyes, calculating my next move. My mother-in-law had already collapsed into a chair, muttering, "Poor my son," and Cyrus was crying inconsolably, leaning against the wall. A truly moving family portrait. 3 months ago, I should have realized then. That day, Alexander came home with a faint scent of perfume on his shirt collar. It wasn't mine, nor the one he usually wore. When I casually asked him, he frowned and said a new intern had sprayed on too much perfume. After that, overtime and business trips became more frequent. On our wedding anniversary, he had to go to a meeting in Chicago. For my birthday, he gave me a diamond necklace that was completely not my style. Later, I found the same necklace on Juliet's Instagram. The most ridiculous thing is that I even blame myself. Perhaps I was too busy with work and had neglected him. Should I take better care of myself? Thinking about it now, I was pathetically stupid. "Eleanor," my mother-in-law suddenly took my hand. Her tone had become soft. This cannot leave here. Alexander is the vice president of the company. He has a reputation to maintain." I looked at her carefully plucked eyebrows and suddenly understood. "You already knew, didn't you?" My mother-in-law's gaze wavered. "I only suspected. Suspected he was cheating, or suspected it was with Juliet?" My voice was low, but every word was a knife. Her silence said it all. I pulled my hand away. I felt a profound nausea. In the end, in this house, the only fooled idiot was me. "Sister-in-law." Cyrus approached, staggering. His face was etched with dried tears. "I'm so sorry." I shook my head. "It's not your fault, Cyrus." "The condoms?" "The doctor says it seems there was a problem with the condom's lubricant. A highly acidic substance was detected." My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't show it in my expression. "How is that possible?" "The police have already started an investigation," Cyrus said, wiping his face. "They found the broken Durex box in the hotel room and have sent the remaining ones for analysis." My mother-in-law suddenly lifted her head. "The police? No, this must be covered up at all costs." She looked at me and said, "Eleanor, go tell the police not to get involved, that this is a family matter." I looked at her, feeling the absurdity of the situation. Even at this moment, she only thought about the Montero family's honor and her son's future. Did she not care that the other woman, lying in an operating room, was the wife of her other son? "Mom," I said calmly, "the police investigation is just a procedure. If there really was a problem with the condoms, the manufacturer will have to take responsibility." These words worked as a sedative. My mother-in-law's expression relaxed a little. Of course, what could be more convenient than blaming the manufacturer? No one would think someone had done it on purpose. A nurse came to tell us we could wait in the room. They wheeled Alexander out on a gurney, still under the effects of anesthesia. His ashen face looked like a corpse. Goodbye, my love. I followed his gurney, looking at the man I once loved deeply. In my heart, there was only a glacial calm. At 5 in the morning, the white light of the hospital made me squint. I hadn't slept all night, watching over Alexander's bedside. I watched his face contort in pain as the anesthesia wore off. Not out of pity, but because when he woke up, the first person he should see was me, his perfect, worried wife. Eleanor? Alexander's voice was rough as sandpaper. He opened his eyes, and after a moment of blurred vision, his gaze fixed on my face. Immediately, I brought a glass of water to his lips. Drink slowly. He drank eagerly, his Adam's apple bobbing up and down. A few drops of water spilled at the corner of his lips, and I dried them with a tender gesture, as if handling a treasure. His gaze drifted to his lower body, wrapped in thick bandages, and his face paled. The doctor says the operation went very well. I took his hand. My voice was barely a whisper, only that there will be some permanent issues. Alexander's breathing quickened. His chest rose and fell agitatedly. And Juliet? How is Juliet? I almost broke his fingers. The first question he asked upon waking was about his mistress, but I just sighed softly. She had a hysterectomy. True terror appeared in his eyes. He grasped the sheets unconsciously. What happened? That condom? The police took it for analysis, I said calmly. For now, they are treating it as a factory defect. It seems an acidic substance mixed with the lubricant. This was a story I had invented after talking to the doctor. It was true that sulfuric acid had been detected, but the hospital had also found small needle marks on the condoms. After donating a considerable sum to the hospital's medical research fund, the director personally promised me to draft an ambiguous report. Alexander closed his eyes, as if trying to process the information. When he opened them again, they were full of tears, not of guilt, but of self-pity. Eleanor, listen to me. Juliet and I are not what you think. I adjusted my facial muscles to show an expression of confusion and magnanimity. Then what is it? We were meeting for a project. His voice was weak, but his tone was firm. He must have invented the story as he woke up. Cyrus's company was having financial problems, and Juliet asked for my help. We met at the hotel to keep it a secret. I almost applauded. What a perfect excuse. The image of the loyal brother going above and beyond for his younger brother. If I hadn't seen those repulsive photos, perhaps I would have believed him a little. I see I intend and nodded at maintaining a sympathetic look. But why didn't you use a normal meeting room? Because it was a trade secret. The hotel was safer. I understand. I squeezed his hand as if understanding. Don't think about anything else. Now recover. We'll talk about the rest later. Alexander's tense body visibly relaxed. A faint smile even appeared on his lips. He must have thought I had believed him. This man who had cheated on me habitually would never imagine that one day I would repay him in kind. The nurse came in to change his IV, and I excused myself to go to the bathroom. I closed the door, and looking at myself in the mirror, I forced a silent, cold smile. The woman in the mirror had slight dark circles, but her gaze was sharp as a blade. At that moment, I clearly felt that something inside me had completely died. In its place, only a cold logic remained. At the end of the hallway, I heard a heated argument. I followed the sound and found Cyrus arguing with someone in a white coat. I'm his brother. I have the right to know my brother's condition. Cyrus's voice was broken. I'm sorry, but hospital rules only allow direct family members and the spouse to access the full medical record, the doctor said. Sign. I approached. Dr. Martinez, this is my brother-in-law, Alexander Montero's brother. You can speak freely in front of him. The doctor hesitated for a moment, but nodded. My neat appearance and calm tone must have been more convincing than Cyrus's disheveled look and bloodshot eyes. Part of the patient's penis was removed, but we preserved the testicles. Theoretically, he can produce male hormones and a small amount of sperm, the doctor said, flipping through the report pages. But he has lost almost all erectile function, and sexual pleasure will be considerably reduced. Cyrus's expression contracted. I didn't know if it was relief or pain. He looked at me and asked, "Sister-in-law, did he wake up?" "He just woke up. Do you want to go see him?" He shook his head and suddenly grabbed my arm. "Juliet has been moved to room 92. Her parents came from Atlanta." His nails dug into my skin. "My mother-in-law says she's going to sue our family." I patted the back of his hand. I felt his trembling. "Don't worry, I'll take care of this." Leaving the hospital, in the parking lot, I called a number I hadn't dialed in 5 years. "Hello, Felix, it's Eleanor." "Eleanor Valdivia. Yes, the same one. The one you always called the paparazzi in journalism school. I got married." "Yes, and now I need your help." Felix was famous in journalism school for his ability to unearth dirt. Now he had a private detective agency specializing in marital cases of wealthy people. On the other end of the line, he whistled upon hearing my request. "Wow, partner, this is a good one. Not only your husband's history of infidelity, but also his company's financial situation." "Money is not a problem," I said, looking at my cold eyes in the rearview shows. "I want everything as detailed as possible and as fast as you can." I hung up and opened the banking app on my phone to check our joint account. I had always managed Alexander's payroll, but in recent years the money he brought home was increasingly less. He always said the company was doing poorly. Thinking about it now, it was obvious that most of the money had gone to Juliet. The account balance was $120,000. Not too much, not too little. I frowned. Adding Alexander's salary and bonuses, it should exceed $200,000 annually. Subtracting expenses and the apartment mortgage, it was impossible for only that to remain. Either he had hidden money or the money was going elsewhere. Arriving home, I went straight to the office and turned on Alexander's computer. The password was still the same. I easily accessed his online banking. Indeed, in addition to the joint account, he had 3 other personal accounts. In the last year, there were dozens of large sum transfers, and the beneficiary was always Studio Val, a shell company in Juliet Rivers' name. I took screenshots of all the records and took out the house deeds, car papers, and investment documents to photograph them one by one. All of these would be my weapons. In the back of a drawer, I found our marriage certificate. A thin layer of dust already covered it. I opened it and saw our photos. We were smiling radiantly as if we truly believed in the fairy tale of eternal happiness. Suddenly, my phone vibrated, an unknown number with an Atlanta area code. "Are you Alexander Montero's wife?" A sharp woman's voice snapped without preamble. "I'm Juliet's mother. Your family is going to have to take responsibility for what you did to my daughter." I put it on speakerphone. I left the phone on the desk and calmly poured myself a glass of water. "Mrs. Rivers, good afternoon. I perfectly understand how you feel." "Understand my butt!" The woman was practically yelling. "My daughter is only 28. They took out her uterus. She won't be a normal woman anymore. The men in your family are beasts." I took a sip of water and waited for her screams to subside. "Ma'am, I'm very sorry for what happened. But as far as I know, your daughter and my husband were together by mutual consent, and the condoms were found in the hotel room, and your daughter's fingerprints were on them." There were a few seconds of silence on the other side, followed by an even more furious torrent of insults. "What are you saying? Are you trying to shirk your responsibility?" "I'm only telling you the facts." My voice was serene. "If you want to demand responsibility, you better contact my husband or my mother-in-law directly. All the finances of our house are controlled by my mother-in-law." The bait worked. Juliet's mother immediately asked, "What is your mother-in-law's phone number?" I gave her the number without hesitation and added, "Oh, and my husband must have quite a bit of money in his personal accounts. It will be enough for Juliet's medical and care expenses. I'll send you the details." I hung up and reclined on the sofa. A smile formed on my lips without realizing it. I would let my mother-in-law deal with Juliet's temperamental mother. The catfight would be worth watching. As for Alexander's hidden money, I could consider it his farewell gift to Juliet. By nightfall, when I returned to the hospital, the atmosphere in the hallway had changed. Several nurses were whispering when they saw me. a spark of interest in their eyes. In front of Alexander's room, 2 police officers were talking to my mother-in-law. I adjusted my pace to appear tired and worried. "Mom, what's wrong?" My mother-in-law turned around. Her face was ashen. "The police say it looks like someone deliberately tampered with the condoms." She grabbed my wrist tightly. "Did you see the box of condoms when you packed Alexander's bag?" My heart sped up, but my expression didn't change. "Condoms? No, I didn't see anything like that while packing his bag." An officer approached and showed me his badge. "Mrs. Valdivia, we need to ask you a few questions. Your husband claims he received those condoms as a gift from someone else. Do you have any idea who that might be?" "A gift?" I could barely contain my laughter. "My husband receives gifts often, but he has never brought condoms home." I pretended to hesitate for a moment. Although what?" the officer instantly asked. "Last week, Juliet came to our house and brought a strawberry cake. She loves the strawberry flavor," I said, as if I had just remembered. "But I didn't see her give him condoms. It's just a thought." The officer took notes quickly. My mother-in-law's face darkened even more. Clearly, she suspected Juliet had tried to harm her son. "Mrs. Valdivia," the officer continued, "did you notice any strange behavior in your husband before the incident?" I shook my head, my eyes reddening at the right moment. "Lately, he was very stressed about work. He was working a lot of overtime, but I never imagined something like this would happen." My voice conveniently broke. The officer asked a couple more formal questions and left. My mother-in-law followed him to ask about the progress of the investigation, and I entered the room. Alexander was sending a message on his cell phone. When he saw me, he locked the screen with suspicious speed. "The police came," I said, as if nothing had happened, setting down my purse. He nodded, but his gaze was uneasy. "They say someone injected sulfuric acid into the condoms." "My God!" I put my hand to my mouth. "Who would do such a thing?" Alexander didn't answer, but his gaze darkened. Suddenly, I realized he suspected Juliet. The idea almost made me burst out laughing. What a perfect way to sow discord. I didn't even need to lift a finger. "Did Cyrus come?" I asked. Alexander shook his head with an awkward expression. "That kid. It must be hard for him to accept it right now." "Normal, his wife and his own brother." I said the last part, watching Alexander's expression twitch upon hearing the word brother. The door burst open. Cyrus was on the threshold, his eyes red as embers. "Brother," his voice was broken. "Juliet woke up. She says you bought the condoms." The color drained from Alexander's face instantly. "Don't talk nonsense. She bought them at a store." "Oh, yeah?" Cyrus approached the bed, step by step, said, "Then why does the store clerk remember seeing a man in a suit buy strawberry Durex? The hotel cameras also recorded you entering the elevator with them." I stood aside, quietly enjoying the confrontation between the brothers. Alexander was visibly nervous, cold sweat on his forehead. I only you slept with my wife?" Cyrus hit the bed railing with his fist. The whole bed shook. "The doctor says Juliet will never be able to have children. Are you happy now?" A nurse came in upon hearing the noise and took Cyrus away, who had lost control. Only Alexander and I remained in the room. A strange silence hung in the air. "Eleanor," his voice trembled. "It's not like that." "Shh, don't talk." I poured him a glass of water and fluffed his pillow. "You need to rest." I sat in the chair by the window, watching him close his eyes with apprehension. The sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting striped shadows on his face. Like the bars of a cell, there was a time when I was madly in love with that face. Now, looking at him, I only felt a cold distance. My phone vibrated once. It was an email from Felix. Initial investigation results. Alexander not only maintained a long-term relationship with Juliet Rivers, but also had an ambiguous relationship with the company's financial director, Brooke Castle, and is being investigated for embezzlement. The attachment contained several blurry photos and bank statements. I locked my phone and looked out the window. Birds were hopping freely among the branches of a tree. Suddenly, I remembered the words my father told me before I got married. "Eleanor, you're too strong, but in marriage, sometimes you have to know how to act weak." Now I understood. It wasn't about acting weak, but about accumulating strength. Felix's report was a time bomb in my inbox. Sitting in the furthest corner of a Starbucks, I flipped through the pages on the tablet, reviewing those repulsive photos. Alexander and Juliet in hotels, in the car, even on our living room sofa. The oldest photo was from March of last year, our fourth wedding anniversary. If you need more information, let me know anytime. Felix, sitting across from me, took a sip of his coffee. Your husband was having a great time. He even had a college student on the payroll. I lifted my head abruptly. A college student? It looks like you haven't reached the end. He wiped his mouth. The company's financial director, a certain Brooke Castle. Apparently, she's an employee, but she's actually his sponsored mistress. She finished college last year. I quickly flipped through the pages. Indeed, there were photos of Alexander with a young girl. She had long, straight hair, an innocent appearance, and didn't look older than 20. The background was several luxury restaurants and hotels. These photos, my voice was surprisingly calm. Can they be used as legal evidence? Of course, Felix leaned in, but the big news isn't that. He opened a financial document. There's a big problem in your husband's company books. In the last year, he embezzled at least $500,000 with fake contracts and fictitious invoices. The number hurt my eyes. $500,000. The price of a nice apartment in the city. And he had told me the company was doing poorly, and he had to save money even on my birthday gift. Are you sure where that money went? I forced myself to focus on the rational question. Part went to Juliet's studio, another to Brooke's account, and the rest. Felix paused. It was transferred to a children's hospital account. The note said treatment expenses. A children's hospital? That information baffled me. And Alexander had never shown the slightest interest in children. The fact that we hadn't had children after 5 years of marriage was because he always said he wasn't ready yet. What was this sudden act of charity for? Oh, by the way, Felix took a USB drive out of his bag. Here's an audio file an employee from the hotel gave me. It's a conversation between your husband and Juliet. It's a bit disgusting, but it will be useful. I took the USB and put it deep into my wallet. I've transferred the payment to your account. The rest, when all this is over. I left the coffee shop and stood on the sidewalk, taking a deep breath. The April wind carried the scent of flowers and the sun warmed my face. Too great a contrast with the ice in my heart? Should I cry? Get angry? Strangely, I only felt a peculiar calm, like the one that precedes a storm. My phone vibrated. The name Damien Wells, Alexander's partner, appeared on the screen. Yes, Damien. I cleared my throat so my voice sounded tired, but firm. Eleanor, I heard about Alexander. There are some papers in the office he needs to sign. Damien's voice was as oily as ever. The doctor said he needs absolute rest, I said kindly. If they are urgent documents, can I take care of them? We have a mutual power of attorney. There were a few seconds of silence on the other end. Yes. Damien's tone subtly changed. The truth is, there is something you should know. Lately, Alexander has been doing some not very clean things with the company books. My heart raced, but my voice remained serene. Damien, I don't understand much about finance. The deputy director of finance, Brooke Castle. He paused deliberately. That girl has a document that will probably interest you. If you have a moment, why don't you stop by the office? I hung up and immediately hailed a taxi. Damien and Alexander had collaborated for 10 years. Apparently, they were like brothers, but in reality, they competed with each other. Now that Alexander had fallen, it was clear he was trying to use me for his own ends. The company receptionist looked a little surprised to see me. Madam Vice President? I know, he's hospitalized, I said with a smile. I came to see Brooke Castle from the finance department. The door to Brooke's office was ajar. I knocked gently and walked in. She lifted her head. A clean face, no makeup, long, black, straight hair, a white shirt buttoned up to her neck. The perfect prototype of Alexander's innocent aesthetic. She stood up from her chair, nervously fidgeting with her fingers. I am Alexander Montero's wife. I looked her straight in the eyes, watching her pupils dilate with panic. Damien Wells told me you have some papers for me. Brooke's face turned wax white. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered. Brooke, I took a step closer and lowered my voice. I have all the photos of you and Alexander at the Hilton Hotel. Either you give me those papers now, or I turn you, the papers, and Damien Wells over to the police. You choose. The bluff worked. Brooke slumped into her chair and pulled a folder from the back of a drawer. The vice president told me it was only a temporary loan of funds. I opened the folder. It was a detailed record of the money flow. It clearly indicated where and when each embezzled sum had gone. The most shocking thing was on the last page, a photo of a child about 3 years old. His medical record stated, Elias Montero, acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Who is this child? My voice trembled slightly. Tears fell from Brooke's eyes. He's the vice president's son. He had him with his ex-girlfriend. The woman left after giving birth, and the child was raised in a town with a caregiver. Last year, he was diagnosed with leukemia. The world began to spin. Alexander had a son, 3 years old. That meant he already had a son before we got married. And he had never told me. All his lies, his coldness, his betrayal of the last year suddenly took on a new meaning. It wasn't that he didn't like children, it was that he didn't want to have children with me. Treatment expenses are very high. He told me the vice president couldn't use company money, in case you found out. I closed the folder and put it in my purse. Brooke, submit your resignation tomorrow and get out of this city. Otherwise, these photos will reach your parents' house. Leaving the building, the sunlight was so bright I couldn't open my eyes. I stood on the stairs and suddenly started laughing uncontrollably. I laughed until tears came out. For 5 years of marriage, I had no idea my husband had a secret 3-year-old son. How ridiculous. The man who said he wasn't ready to have children was already a father. In the hospital hallway, my mother-in-law was arguing with Juliet's parents. Juliet's mother was pointing her finger in her face, yelling insults. There's not a decent person in your family. Your son ruined my daughter's life. And you don't think about your daughter seducing my son? Who knows what she did to those condoms? My mother-in-law retorted bitterly. I silently circled the battlefield and entered Alexander's room. He was lying in bed, looking at his cell phone. When he saw me, he locked the screen, a gesture I'd seen too many times. How's the company? He asked, trying hard to sound indifferent. Good. I set down my purse and poured him a glass of water. Damien says he's very worried about you. Alexander's expression tensed for an instant. What did he tell you? Nothing special. He just asked if you were better. I gave him the water and the pills, the antibiotics and painkillers the doctor had prescribed, and a small extra I had secretly added. Seeing him swallow the pill, I felt a vague pleasure. Sulfuric acid is too direct. A laxative is a torture that consumes you slowly. It would make him see how everything he possessed vanished, little by little, just as my pride and love had been lost in recent years. Eleanor. He suddenly took my hand. When I get out of here, we need to talk seriously. Sure, agreed, I smiled. About what? About our future. His gaze wavered. The doctor says I probably never will. Will never what? I pretended not to understand. That I won't be able to have sexual intercourse, he almost yelled, but lowered his voice right away. But we can adopt a child, or there are other ways. I almost dropped the glass. Even in this situation, he was thinking of deceiving me into adopting a child, when he had a child of his own. But I just patted his hand softly. Don't think about that now, recover. The nurse came in to change the IV drip, and I took the opportunity to leave, using the excuse of going to the bathroom. I barely closed the door when I called Felix. Investigate any property under Alexander Montero's name, in rural areas, especially near hospitals, and also information on a 3-year-old child named Elias Montero, a patient with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. I hung up and fixed my hair in front of the mirror. The eyes of the woman in the mirror were cold as ice, but there was a perfect smile on her lips. What a terrible change. The old Eleanor Valdivia was dead. The current one was only an avenger. Returning to the room, Alexander was groaning. My stomach suddenly hurts a lot. What's wrong? I pretended to worry and pressed the call button. Did something you ate upset you? The doctor diagnosed gastroenteritis as a side effect of the medication and changed his treatment. I looked at Alexander, curled up in bed and sweating cold, without feeling the slightest compassion. This was just the beginning. Daughter, my mother-in-law took me to a corner of the hallway at dusk. Eleanor, we can't let this get bigger, she said in a low voice. Alexander is the pillar of the company. If this scandal spreads... Mom, I interrupted her. You already knew about Alexander and Juliet, didn't you? My mother-in-law's expression hardened. What nonsense are you saying? Last Christmas, when you stayed a few days at our house one night, I saw you and Alexander talking on the balcony. I looked her straight in the eyes. You told him, be careful, don't let Eleanor find out. Her lips trembled. I just saw he was very tired from work. Mom, I forced a sneering smile. Do you know something? Alexander has a secret 3-year-old son. This bomb had a devastating effect. My mother-in-law staggered and took a step back, her face pale. Impossible. Alexander wouldn't do something like that. His name is Elias Montero, and he has leukemia. He's admitted to a hospital in Texas, I continued. The embezzlement of company funds was to pay for his treatment. My mother-in-law collapsed into a chair, her hands trembling. That bastard. Look, I crouched down to meet her gaze. Now we both have a secret. If you keep mine, I'll keep yours. What do you say? Panic appeared in her cloudy eyes. What? What are you planning to do? Very simple, I smiled. I'm going to make Alexander Montero lose everything, and you are going to help me. Her silence was a consent. I stood up and straightened my clothes. The first phase was over. Now came the second. Damian Wells called me that night to say the board of directors had decided to temporarily suspend all of Alexander's powers, that with the embezzlement problem, there was no other option. Eleanor, as family, what do you think? Damian, my voice was soft, I don't understand company matters, but while Alexander recovers, can I attend the board meeting in his place? We have that joint power of attorney, you know. On the other end of the line, I heard the rustling of papers. That's true, here it is. Then at the meeting next Tuesday, you will attend as Vice President Montero's representative. I will be there without fail. I hung up, and a smile formed on my lips. Alexander, did you think you were the only one with two faces? As the night progressed, only Alexander's groans of pain remained in the hospital room. The effect of the laxative had made him go to the bathroom 6 times in one night. Now he was exhausted. I sat next to him, tenderly wiping his sweat. Eleanor, he weakly held my hand. You're so good to me. You are my husband, I said, and added to myself, and also my enemy. The phone screen lit up once, a message from Felix. Child located, state hospital in Texas. There is a small apartment under Alexander Montero's name nearby. The child lives there with a caregiver, medical history and photos sent by email. I locked the screen and looked out the window. The cold moonlight fell like frost on the hospital lawn. Elias Montero, 3 years old, an innocent child, but that child had become the irrefutable proof of Alexander's betrayal. Should I hate that child? No, I should thank him. That child had given me the most powerful weapon to destroy Alexander. Tomorrow, I would go to meet that child, and Alexander would face the longest nightmare of his life. The walls of the state hospital in Texas were painted a pale green with mold stains in the corners. A mix of disinfectant and urine odor floated in the hallway. I walked on the crunching floor, following the directions Felix had given me, toward room 307 on the pediatric floor. It was a 6-bedroom, but only the one at the back was occupied. A very thin child was sitting on the bed, flipping through the pages of a storybook. He had little hair, and his face was almost transparent from how pale he was. His wrists seemed about to break. I stopped at the door, suddenly unsure why I was there. To gather more evidence to destroy Alexander, or simply out of curiosity toward that child for whom he had embezzled funds to save him. Are you looking for someone? A middle-aged woman appeared behind me with a basin of hot water in her hands. She must have been the caregiver, Edith, mentioned in Felix's reports. I am Alexander Montero's wife, I said directly, observing her reaction. Edith's hands trembled and she almost dropped the basin. Ma'am, she stammered, does Mr. Montero know you've come? I suppose so. I walked past her and went straight to the bed. The child lifted his head, eyes especially large and dark. As soon as he saw me, his eyes lit up, and a smile formed on his small face. Mommy? He extended his arms. His voice was clear as a little bell. I froze. Mommy. Alexander must have shown him photos of me. Elias, that's not Mommy, Edith said quickly, setting down the basin and taking the child's hand. She's Mr. Montero's wife. Yes, she's Mommy, Elias insisted, pointing at my face. Daddy's phone, Mommy. The impact was like a hammer blow to the chest. Alexander had shown him my photos, telling him I was his mother? This lie angered me more than any other betrayal. Ma'am, don't be upset, Edith said, not knowing what to do. Mr. Montero only did that sometimes to calm the child. I took a deep breath and approached the bed. Elias, how old are you? 3.5, he said, proudly raising 4 fingers, but quickly correcting to 3. Daddy says I can go to kindergarten soon. 3.5 years old. I quickly calculated. When Alexander and I had been married for just over a year, he went to New York for a business trip for 2 months. When he returned, he was especially affectionate with me. Thinking about it now, it must have been because of the guilt. Mommy, a hug! Elias suddenly launched himself at me and wrapped his small arms around my neck. He was light as a feather, and his body smelled of a mix of medicines and the sweet scent of children. Instinctively, I hugged him. His small, warm body felt fragile in my arms. From the depths of my being, a strange emotion surged, as if the surface of a frozen lake began to crack. How is Elias's treatment going? I asked Edith, forcing composure. The doctor says it's not going well, Edith said, wiping a tear. Chemotherapy isn't working well, and he needs a bone marrow transplant, but they can't find a compatible donor. Mr. Montero was tested, but he wasn't compatible, and the biological mother is nowhere to be found. I looked at the child in my arms. He was absorbed, playing with the buttons on my shirt. His long eyelashes cast a shadow on his face. How could such a small life suffer so much pain? And the existence of this child was completely disrupting my revenge plan. Is there still enough money for the treatment? I asked. Edith shook her head. Mr. Montero says the company has been doing poorly lately. Last month, he didn't even pay the treatment bill. I smiled contemptuously. Poorly. He must have spent all the money on Juliet and Brooke. Mommy, look! Elias showed me the storybook. There was a drawing of a family of 3 holding hands. This is Daddy, this is Mommy, and this is me. A lump formed in my throat. This innocent child didn't know the man he called Daddy was in a hospital, having lost his sexual function after an infidelity with another woman, nor did he know the woman he believed to be his mother was planning to destroy everything his father owned. Ma'am, Edith asked cautiously, are you going to tell Mr. Montero you've been here? I gently put Elias down and took a card from my purse. Here's Ken, $20,000. The pin is Alexander's birthday. Pay the overdue bills first and use the rest to continue the treatment. Edith's eyes widened, taking the card as if she couldn't believe it. Don't tell him I gave it to you. I stood up and looked at Elias one last time. He looked at me with confused eyes. He seemed not to understand why Mommy was leaving so soon. Leaving the hospital, the sunlight hurt my eyes. I sat in the car, unable to calm down for a long time. The innocent gaze of that child, his cheerful voice calling me, Mommy. It was all too cruel an irony. For 5 years of marriage, I had wanted to have a child so much, but I never got pregnant, and meanwhile, Alexander already had his own son and had been deceiving me. The phone ringing pulled me out of my thoughts. It was Damian Wells. Eleanor, the board meeting has been moved up to tomorrow at 9 a.m. His voice sounded excited. A major investor has suddenly appeared, talking about an acquisition. Without Alexander, it's crucial that you attend as his representative. An acquisition? I maintained caution. I can't talk much on the phone. We'll discuss it tomorrow. He hung up hastily, and my suspicions grew. I started the car and decided to return to the city hospital first to check on Alexander's condition. In the rearview mirror, the Texas hospital became smaller and smaller, but Elias's image wouldn't leave my mind. In Alexander's room, my mother-in-law was giving him soup. When she saw me enter, her hand visibly trembled. Eleanor, you came. Hello. Alexander smiled with effort. He looked worse than the day before. The laxative must have had a good effect. Mom, go rest. I'll take care of Alexander. I took the bowl of soup, deliberately brushing my mother-in-law's hand. I felt her trembling. My mother-in-law hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded. I'm going to see Cyrus. She left quickly. Her back looked somewhat hunched. How's the company? Alexander asked urgently. Good. I scooped a spoonful of soup and brought it to his mouth. Damian says a major investor has proposed an acquisition. There's a board meeting tomorrow. Alexander tried to sit up suddenly, but groaned in pain and fell back onto the pillow. Acquisition? What acquisition? I didn't authorize anything. Calm down. I held him, pretending to worry. Damian says it's a very urgent matter. It could be a good opportunity. A piece of shit opportunity. Alexander clenched his teeth. I built that company from scratch. Who does Damian Wells think he is? I silently watched his anger. I didn't feel the slightest compassion. So, the company is what matters most to him. That was very useful information. I'll attend the meeting tomorrow and convey your opinion, I said kindly. Alexander stared at me. His gaze was complex. Eleanor, you've changed a lot lately. Yes, I smiled. People change. The nurse came in to change the IV drip, and I took the opportunity to leave. In the hallway, my mother-in-law appeared like a ghost and blocked my path. Did you go see that child? I raised an eyebrow. You were very well informed. Eleanor. She grabbed my arm, her nails dug into my skin. We can't let that child stay there. We cannot allow such a stain on the Montero name. I pulled free from her grasp, shocked by her cruelty. Mom, he is your grandson, your only grandson. He is a stain. My mother-in-law clenched her teeth. Alexander lost his mind, but you can't do the same. That child won't live long. It's just a useless expense of... Suddenly, I understood. You already knew about Elias's existence, didn't you? My mother-in-law's gaze wavered. I found out a while ago. You're lying. I smiled contemptuously, just like you helped him deceive me with Juliet. My mother-in-law's face turned white as paper. Eleanor, the Montero lineage cannot end. Now that Alexander is like this, that child is the only one with our blood. And what do you want me to do? You have to accept him. The shocking words came out of my mother-in-law's mouth. Bring him home and raise him as your own son. I almost burst out laughing. What an absurd proposal. Her son had betrayed me, and now she intended for me to raise his secret son? Mom, I said slowly, it seems you forget that Alexander is now an invalid. The company, the properties, and even that child will soon cease to be yours. My mother-in-law staggered back, looking at me as if I were a stranger. What do you plan to do? You'll know after tomorrow's meeting. I turned around, leaving her stranded and stunned in the hallway. Returning home, I took a long, hot bath. I tried to wash away the smell of the Texas hospital, but Elias's voice calling me, Mommy, echoed in my ears. How many times had I wished to hear that word in the last 5 years, and I had to hear it under these circumstances. My phone vibrated, an email from Felix. The attachment contained Elias's detailed medical history and Alexander's monthly transfer records. Seeing the last pages, I sat up. It was information about Alexander's ex-girlfriend, Elias's biological mother, 28 years old, former singer at a gentleman's club. She left after giving birth. She is believed to reside in Miami, but her whereabouts are unknown. A blurry photo was attached. The woman wore heavy makeup, which made it difficult to recognize her face. I kept flipping through the pages and held my breath. The last document was a bank statement from my mother-in-law. She sent a fixed amount of money every month to an account in Miami, and she had been doing so for the last 3 years. The beneficiary's name was intentionally hidden, but the timing and amount matched this woman's departure. My mother-in-law was paying Elias's biological mother. Why, to keep silent? My head began to hurt. All of this was much more complicated than I had imagined. Alexander's betrayal, the existence of the secret son, my mother-in-law's cover-up, and that suspicious board meeting tomorrow. The bathwater had already cooled. I got up, dried myself, and looked in the mirror. A 30-year-old woman, fine wrinkles around her eyes, but still a good body. How much had I loved Alexander? Enough to turn down a good job offer abroad. Enough to endure my mother-in-law's disdain. Enough to forgive his coldness again and again. Now, that naive Eleanor Valdivia was dead. The eyes of the woman in the mirror were cold as ice, but there was a perfect smile on her lips. Tomorrow, the second phase of my revenge would officially begin. But that small pale face that had called me Mommy had become the biggest variable in my plan. Montero Group conference room. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, falling onto the long table. The document covers shone. Sitting in Alexander's spot, I lightly tapped my fingers on the table, waiting for the meeting to begin. Eleanor, forgive the wait. Damian Wells strode in, followed by several directors and a middle-aged man in an impeccable suit. I introduce you to Horace Solar, president of Solar Investments. He is very interested in our project. I stood up and shook Horace's hand, reading the evaluative meaning in his gaze as he examined me. Mr. Solar, I've heard a lot about you. My husband always mentioned you. Mrs. Valdivia, you are much more determined than the rumors say, Horace smiled. How is Mr. Montero doing? Recovering. Thank you for asking, I said, gesturing for everyone to sit down. Damien, I heard we were going to discuss an acquisition matter today. Damien cleared his throat and turned on the projector. Solar Investments is interested in acquiring 30% of our company's shares at a price 20% above the market value. Complex financial data and the shareholder structure appeared on the screen. I quickly reviewed it and saw that several of the transactions embezzled by Alexander were specially marked in the fund flow diagram. Of course, this is just a draft, Damien said, looking at me significantly. We can adjust the details little by little. I understood his intention. This was not an acquisition meeting. It was a coup, an attempt to blackmail me with Alexander's financial problems to seize control of the company. Mr. Solar, I said, ignoring Damien and addressing him directly, do you know what role my husband plays in this company? Horace raised an eyebrow. Mr. Montero is the key technical staff. Yes, but a company cannot depend on a single person. Very well said. I turned on the tablet I'd brought. This is a 5-year development plan I've prepared, including new product lines and market expansion plans. I slid the tablet toward Horace. The value of the Montero Group is not in the present, but in the future. If you want 30% of the shares, you will have to offer triple the current valuation. The room fell silent. Damien's mouth was slightly open, with an expression that he had not expected my move at all. Interesting, Horace said, skimming my plan. Did you prepare it yourself, Mrs. Valdivia? My husband and I are spouses and business partners, I smiled. Only normally, I prefer to be in the background. It was a risky gamble. I had no authority to decide the sale of shares, but if I managed to retain Horace, I would buy time to deal with Damien. At the end of the meeting, Damien Wells stopped me. Eleanor, what the hell are you planning? Damien, I looked him straight in the eyes. I know you have evidence of Alexander's embezzlement of funds, but don't forget that the company's key technological patents are in my name. This was a wedding gift Alexander gave me. At the time, I thought it was just a legal formality, but now it had become my lifeline. Damien's face hardened. We can collaborate. I lowered my voice. Let's get rid of Alexander, and you become president. I'll take care of the technology, the profits, 50-50. His eyes sparkled. Greed is always the greatest weakness of human beings. Before leaving, I stopped by the finance department. Under the pretext of catching up on the company's situation, I asked for the books for the last 3 years. The new accountant, a recent graduate who had replaced Brooke, obediently complied. These transfers, I pointed to the records of the shipments to Juliet's studio, are there invoices? The young woman shook her head. The vice president processed it as a special payment, saying it was for collaboration on a project. I photographed all suspicious transactions. I already had a plan in mind. The fact that Alexander had maintained his mistress with company money would be enough evidence for me to keep the majority of the assets in the divorce trial. In the hospital hallway, I ran into Cyrus. With a messy beard and bloodshot eyes, he wandered the hallway like a ghost. Sister-in-law, he said with a broken voice when he saw me. Can we talk for a moment? We went into an empty room. Cyrus sat down and burst into tears. Thick tears fell to the floor. Juliet wants to divorce me. She says the person she loved was my brother. I offered him a tissue without feeling the slightest compassion. And what are you planning to do? I don't know. He pulled his hair up. He was my brother, and he ruined my life. It's true, I nodded. How can a brother do that to his own brother, knowing that Juliet was everything to you? These words were like adding fuel to the fire. Cyrus jumped up, his eyes burning with rage. I'm going to kill him. Don't talk nonsense. I squeezed his shoulders. It's not worth ruining your life over someone like that. You have to recover what is yours. What's mine? The company, I whispered, slowly coaxing him. You are also the Montero family's second son. Why does all the inheritance have to go to your brother? Now that he's an invalid, it's up to you to inherit it. Cyrus was stunned. It seemed like a problem he had never thought about. But I don't know anything about business. I will help you, I smiled. Together. When I said goodbye to Cyrus, he was a completely different man. In his eyes, there was no longer pain, but ambition. Another piece of my chess game was in place. In Alexander's room, a doctor was examining his wound. The recovery's going well, but if he has emotional ups and downs, the wound could worsen. Yes, doctor, I will be careful, I replied meekly. I watched the doctor leave and then took a pill bottle from my purse. Time for medication. Alexander frowned. This pill upsets my stomach. The doctor prescribed it. He says it's good for you. I poured him a glass of water and gave him the pill. This time, in addition to the laxative, I had added a little sleeping pill, just enough for him to sleep soundly for half a day. As soon as he swallowed it, he seemed to get sleepy. Eleanor, the company, is it okay? Yes, I said kindly. Damien is helping a lot. Damien, that old fox. Alexander's voice faded. That bastard, I'm sure he's taken advantage of my absence. He couldn't finish the sentence before falling asleep. I took his cell phone, unlocked it with his fingerprint, and started searching. The chat history with Juliet on WhatsApp was clean, but there was a recent text message. Juliet, don't worry about the medical expenses. I'll find a way to get them. I love you. The sending time was the night before. At that time, he was asleep. Checking the sent messages, I saw it had been sent by voice recognition. Even in his sleep, he worried about his mistress. Anger surged through my body, and I almost threw the phone, but thinking about it, what better proof than this? I took a screenshot and kept searching. I found an encrypted note. The password hint was Elias's birthday. I entered the date I had seen in the Texas hospital medical record. It unlocked. Inside, all of Elias's expenses and treatment progress were registered. The last entry said, marrow incompatibility, desperate. Maybe Eleanor. The text was cut off there. He had even considered asking me to be tested for bone marrow compatibility. His audacity surpassed all imagination. Just as I was about to put the phone down, a WhatsApp notification popped up. Vice President, I have destroyed all the documents for the Texas project. Not even the police will find a trace. The sender was Damien Wells. Texas project, police. I quickly noted down these keywords and put the phone back in its place. It seemed there was an even darker secret between Alexander and Damien. The nurse came in to change the IV drip, and I went out with the excuse of getting a coffee. Just as I reached the hospital entrance, someone called my name. Eleanor Valdivia. Is that really you? I turned around. A tall, handsome man was standing underground the sun in an impeccable suit and a lawyer's badge on his lapel. Tristan Ledesma? I recognized the one who had been the top student in his law school class, the same one who had persistently courted me until I rejected him and he went to study in the United States. 10 years and you are more beautiful than ever, he smiled, approaching. I came to see a client and didn't expect to find you. After some greetings, Tristan got straight to the point. I saw the news about your husband. If you need legal help, what is your specialty? I interrupted him. Divorces and economic crimes. He handed me a card. Especially dealing with unfaithful husbands is my thing. Fate sometimes creates these amazing coincidences. I took the card, lightly brushing the tips of my fingers against his palm. Just the kind of lawyer I need. Whenever you want, he looked at me meaningfully. I would do it for free for you. Before saying goodbye, Tristan suddenly said, Oh, and I'm very sorry about your mother. I froze. You remember my mother? Of course, he frowned. She died in a car accident. You were in your 3rd year of college. That's why you took a sabbatical. I nodded with difficulty, but a huge wave was stirring inside me. My mother's accident happened right after Alexander started courting me. At the time, he told me it had been a simple accident, but connecting it with the Texas project message I had just seen, returning to the room, Alexander was still deeply asleep. I sat by the window, lost in thought. If my mother's accident wasn't a simple accident, if Alexander approached me with another purpose, then all this was much darker and sordid than I had imagined. My phone vibrated. A message from Felix. Texas project located. Public Works project awarded to Alexander Montero's company 5 years ago. It was suspended due to a workplace accident. A worker died after falling. The compensation disappeared. Name of the deceased, Arthur Valdivia. Blood ran cold in my veins. Arthur Valdivia. My father's name. Those two words stabbed my heart like a sharp knife. I stared at the phone screen as if the letters could change and suddenly disappear. My father left home when I was 10. My mother said he had gone to work abroad, and we never heard from him again. And now Felix was telling me my father had died at a construction site for which Alexander was responsible. Give me more details, I wrote with trembling hands. Soon, Felix sent me the scanned accident investigation report. 5 years ago, at the construction site of the Texas highway, a scaffold collapsed and a worker died instantly. My father's name was clearly written on the list of fatalities. The report indicated compensation had been paid to the family, but my mother never received a penny. The most chilling thing was that the accident happened just 2 weeks before my mother's car accident. My temples were throbbing. A terrible suspicion formed in my mind. My mother had found out the truth about my father's death and had been silenced. Is there any more information? I asked Felix. I'm investigating, but there's something strange. In the official records, the number of fatalities is 0. Your father's name has been erased. I put down the phone. My hands were trembling uncontrollably. The sunlight suddenly seemed blinding, and the smell of disinfectant in the hospital was nauseating. 5 years of marriage, I had believed Alexander loved me, that even if his feelings had changed, they had been sincere at first. But what if he approached me to keep an eye on me, or to silence me? In bed, Alexander moved and mumbled something unintelligible in his sleep. I approached and looked at the man I once loved deeply. His eyelashes trembled, and the corner of his lips curved downward like a scared child's. This image had softened my heart in the past, but now it only disgusted me. Eleanor, he opened his eyes suddenly. His gaze was blurred by the sedative. I'm sorry. I froze. Sorry for what? Your mother, Texas. His voice faded and he fell asleep again. A shiver ran from my feet to the back of my neck. He had just said Texas. It wasn't a coincidence. Alexander knew something about my parents. I grabbed my purse and ran out of the room. In the hallway, I almost collided with the nurse. Ma'am, are you okay? The nurse held me as I stumbled. Yes, I'm just a little tired. I forced a smile and asked, where can I consult a patient's detailed medical record? The nurse hesitated. In principle, only family. I'm his wife. I took out a copy of our marriage certificate, which I always carried with me just in case. I'm worried my husband has an allergy to the medication. I must have looked so distraught that the nurse took pity on me. The doctor's office is empty now. The computer password is L2023. The office was empty. I quickly turned on the computer, entered the password, and accessed Alexander's full history. Flipping to the page of medication reaction records, I held my breath. The night shift nurse had written, patient during sleep repeats words like Texas and Elvira, showing signs of anxiety. Elvira was my mother's name. My vision blurred. During 5 years of marriage, Alexander had never asked about my mother on his own initiative. Thinking about it now, it was very strange. It's normal to ask about your spouse's deceased parents, right? My phone vibrated again. It was Tristan. Do you have a moment? I found something about your husband's company. We met in a coffee shop near the hospital. Tristan was already sitting, several documents spread out on the table. Did you already find something? I sat down, trying to keep my voice steady even though my heart was shattered. Tristan slid a copy of a document to me. It's an internal audit report of the Montero Group from 5 years ago about the Texas project. The report detailed how after the project accident, Alexander and Damian Wells had conspired to manipulate the books and divert the compensation. The most shocking thing was that, although the cause of the accident was recorded as a human error, it was actually due to the use of substandard materials. With just this, both would go to jail, Tristan said in a low voice. But the strangest thing is this. He pointed to a list of names on a page. My father's name was specially marked, and next to it said, Family members managed. My nails dug into the palm of my hand. Managed? What does that mean? I'm not sure, but from my experience, Tristan hesitated. It usually means they were given money to keep silent, or more drastic methods were used. The coffee cup fell from my hands. The brown liquid splashed onto the documents. Tristan noticed my strange reaction. Eleanor, is this Arthur Valdivia on the list? He's my father. I admitted with difficulty. Tristan's face hardened. My God. Then is it possible your husband approached you from the beginning with a purpose? Tristan, I need your help, I said, barely regaining my composure. Two things, and first, the truth about my mother's accident. Second, prepare the divorce. I'm going to leave Alexander Montero ruined. Of course, Tristan gathered the document. But be careful. People who do these things, when cornered, are capable of anything. Back at the hospital, I crossed paths with my mother-in-law in the hallway. She looked very unwell, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Mom, I stopped her. Do you know a man named Arthur Valdivia? The color drained from her face. The thermos she was carrying fell to the floor with a crash. How do you know that name? I saw it on the victim list for the Texas Project. I took a step closer. He's my father. My mother-in-law staggered back, hitting the wall. Impossible. How can Arthur Valdivia's daughter be you? So you knew, I smiled contemptuously. How funny, right? Your son married his enemy's daughter. No, it's not like that. My mother-in-law suddenly grabbed my hand. Her nails dug deep into my skin. Alexander didn't know. He found out later. And then what? What did he do? I asked harshly. My mother-in-law's lips trembled. Tears rolled down her cheeks. He wanted to compensate you. He was sincere. I pulled free from her grasp. As sincere as he was with my father, I suppose. Eleanor. My mother-in-law suddenly knelt down. People passing by stopped to stare. The child. Elias. He's not to blame. Please. Elias, why did you bring up the child now? Before I could ask more, a nurse came running to tell us Alexander had woken up and was very agitated. Inside the room, Alexander was yelling. Several nurses were trying to restrain him to give him a sedative. Eleanor, where is Eleanor? Let me see, Eleanor. I'm here. I approached the bed with a worried expression. What's wrong? Did you have a nightmare? Seeing me, Alexander instantly calmed down. An indecipherable emotion crossed his eyes. Where were you? I went to buy your favorite soup. I lifted the bag I was carrying. The nurses exchanged a glance and left silently. We were left alone. The rhythmic beep of the cardiac monitor echoed. Eleanor. Alexander extended a weak hand to touch me. I avoided it, pretending to fix his blanket. I dreamed about your mother. I turned my back on him, clenching my teeth so my voice wouldn't tremble. Why would you dream about my mother? You barely knew her. I don't know. He paused. I just felt like I owed her an apology for not taking good care of you. What a perfect performance. If I didn't know about the Texas Project, I might have been moved by his sincerity. Don't worry about it. I turned around, smiled, and brought a spoonful of soup to his mouth. Eat something. He opened his mouth docilely, but his gaze didn't leave my face. Eleanor, if I ever did anything wrong to you, could you forgive me? My hand with the spoon paused for an instant. It depends on what it is. For example, if I hid something from the past. For example, something like the Texas Project. I attacked head-on. Alexander's body visibly tensed. The soup spilled from the corner of his lips. How did you... I know much more than you think. I put down the bowl of soup. My voice was light as a feather, but every word was a knife. For example, Arthur Valdivia. For example, family members managed. His pupils contracted sharply. His face turned ashen. Eleanor, let me explain. Shh. I covered his lips with a finger. Not now. Rest. We'll have plenty of time to talk. Leaving the room, my phone rang. It was a call from the state hospital in Texas. Ma'am, Elias's bone marrow test results have arrived. The doctor's voice sounded perplexed. There's something strange. You and the child are not blood relatives, but your tissue compatibility is very high, almost at the level of a direct family member. I gripped the phone, and I remembered my mother-in-law's strange attitude and Elias calling me Mommy. A wild idea occurred to me. What if Elias wasn't Alexander's son? The air conditioning in the courtroom was strong, but I felt a heat rising from the depths of my being. 3 months of meticulous planning culminated today. The room was full of journalists, company employees, and even Juliet's friends. Alexander, sitting in the defendant's box, nervously moved his leg, his face gloomy. Since the operation, he had behaved like a broken toy. Statement from the plaintiff, the judge said, hitting the gavel. Tristan stood up. His impeccable suit enhanced his presence. Your Honor, the plaintiff accuses the defendant, Alexander Montero, of adultery, domestic violence, and concealment of marital assets. He presented photos, bank statements, and medical records as evidence. When the photos of Alexander and Juliet at the hotel appeared on the large screen, a murmur of astonishment was heard in the room. Objection, those photos were taken illegally and are inadmissible as evidence, Alexander's lawyer shouted. The photos were taken in a public place and are legitimate evidence. Tristan smiled. He pressed a button and an audio clip played. Juliet, my wife is just an ornament. As soon as I get the patents in my name, I'm divorcing her. Alexander's voice resonated clearly. The room fell silent. I felt Alexander's murderous gaze fixed on the back of my neck. Your Honor, this is just the beginning, Tristan continued. The defendant embezzled company funds to support his mistress for a sum of $500,000. The screen showed the bank statements. The beneficiaries were Studio Val and Brooke Castle's personal account. Alexander's lawyer protested again. These are normal business transactions. Oh, yes? Tristan raised an eyebrow and played another audio clip. It was my conversation with Damien Wells. Damien, the money Alexander sent to Juliet was from the company, right? Of course, he accounted for it as project expenses. And Brooke Castle, Brooke was his mistress. He spent all the money on her. Alexander jumped up. The chair scraped against the floor. Damien, you bastard traitor! The guards restrained him. The judge hit the gavel, warning him. I turned my head and met Alexander's gaze, giving him an almost imperceptible smile. His pupils contracted. Finally, he had realized that everything had been my plan. Your Honor, we call the second witness. At Tristan's call, Cyrus walked to the stand, messy beard, deep dark circles. He was devastated since his divorce. Mr. Montero, what is your relationship with the accused? He is my brother, Cyrus said with a broken voice. Is the woman in the audio clip your ex-wife, Juliet Rivers? Yes, Cyrus clenched his fist. They were together for over a year. My brother even bought her an apartment. The room murmured again. Alexander's lawyer tried to object, but the evidence was irrefutable. Final question, did the accused ever assault you? Cyrus rolled up his sleeve and showed a scar on his arm. This is a cigarette burn he gave me when he found out I had told my sister-in-law everything. At the right moment, I lowered my head and wiped a tear. The judge's gaze visibly softened. It was a performance I had rehearsed countless times. The perfect victim. Without exaggeration. Your Honor, we call the last witness. I didn't expect Tristan to call my mother-in-law. The elderly woman approached the stand with trembling steps. Alexander's expression changed from anger to panic. Witness, did you help cover up your son's infidelity? My mother-in-law's lips trembled. Her cloudy eyes met mine. I nodded slightly, reminding her of our pact, her testimony in exchange for Elias's custody. Yes. Her voice was barely a whisper. I lied to Eleanor several times because of Alexander. What exactly did you do? And once on Eleanor's birthday, Alexander was at a hotel with Juliet, and I told Eleanor he was in a meeting. My mother-in-law's testimony was the final blow for Alexander. During the recess, I ran into Alexander in the bathroom. He blocked the door, radiating hostility. Do you think you've won? He said in a low voice, bringing his finger close to my face. Bitch. The photos, the audio clips. You planned everything, didn't you? I took a step back, making sure the security camera captured his threat. The law believes in evidence, not motives. You'll see. His face was distorted. When I get out of here, I'll leave you as miserable as your parents. How did you do that to my parents? I asked in a low voice. Alexander's expression froze. Just then, Tristan opened the door and stepped between us. Mr. Montero, keep your distance. When the trial resumed, Tristan dropped the final bombshell. Your Honor, we have just received new evidence that the accused is also guilty of fraud and negligent homicide. The old accident report appeared on the screen. Texas Project, one deceased worker. Name Arthur Valdivia, the plaintiff's father. Tristan's voice was grave. The accused concealed the truth of the accident and falsified the compensation records. The courtroom descended into chaos. Journalists kept flashing their cameras. Alexander, with an ashen face, said nothing. And what is even more terrible, Tristan continued, is that the plaintiff's mother, Mrs. Elvira Campos, Died in a car accident shortly after discovering the truth. He showed a blurry photo, a black car hitting a woman on the sidewalk, my nails dug into my palm, but I maintained a sad and strong expression. I had recovered the photo, paying a fortune from the street security cameras. It was blurry, but enough to shock. "Objection, this has no relation to this case," Alexander's lawyer yelled. "On the contrary," Tristan calmly retorted, "this explains why the accused controlled the plaintiff and concealed his assets for so long. He feared she would discover the truth and seek revenge." The judge suspended the session, but the outcome was already decided. 3 days later, the verdict arrived. Divorce granted, said. I kept Yunt 70% of the marital assets, control of the company, and 2 apartments in Alexander's name. Furthermore, the court referred the evidence of his economic crimes to the prosecutor's office. He faced at least 5 years in prison. In Tristan's office, he poured me a glass of champagne. "Congratulations, a perfect victory." I took a sip. The bubbles burst on my tongue with a bitter aftertaste. "It's not over yet. The secret of Elias's birth has not yet been revealed." "About that," Tristan pulled out an envelope. "The DNA result is certain that you and Elia are relatives. But the strange thing is," I opened the envelope. The report clearly stated, estimated aunt-nephew relationship. "Aunt-nephew," I frowned. "That means Elias is not his son, but your nephew," Tristan explained. "That is, his father would have to be your brother, but you are an only child, aren't you?" My mind raced. Did my father have a secret child, or my mother? Leaving the law firm, it was already night. As I headed to the parking lot, a shadow emerged from behind a column. It was Alexander. "Are you happy?" he said with an alcoholic breath. "I have nothing left, just like you 5 years ago." "Like me 5 years ago," I said calmly, reaching into my purse and activating the recorder. "What about your parents?" "I didn't do it all," he suddenly said. "Damian Wells was the mastermind. I just didn't stop it." A belated confession. "Do you know something?" I said in a low voice. "Elias's DNA matches mine, as aunt and nephew." Alexander's expression strangely changed. "So you found out?" He shook his head, backing away. "Eleanor, do you think you've won? There are secrets that are better never known." Just then a police car entered the parking lot. Alexander saw it and disappeared into the darkness. Tristan had called the police, fearing he would attack me. "Are you okay?" Tristan ran toward me. "Yes," I said, looking in the direction Alexander had disappeared. "But from what he said, it seems there's another secret about Elias's birth." Arriving home, I checked the security cameras. There was nothing out of the ordinary. I sighed in relief, showered, and got ready for bed. Just then my phone rang. It was a nurse from the state hospital in Texas. "Ma'am, it's an emergency. Elias's condition has suddenly worsened. He needs immediate surgery." My heart skipped a beat. "I'm on my way." On the empty highway, I stepped on the gas. "Elias has to be okay. He is my only family now, even if I still didn't know what kind of family we were." In the hospital hallway, Edith was nervously waiting. "Ma'am, the doctor says he needs surgery now, but it's very risky." "Money is not a problem," I interrupted her. "Get the best doctors, the best medicines." "But," Edith hesitated, "Mr. Montero, your ex-husband was just here." Blood ran cold in my veins. "Him? What was he doing here? He said he was going to transfer the child to another hospital, and he left this." She handed me a note. It was a scrawled address. "Old Texas Warehouses, number 17. On the back, a small note. "If you want to know the truth, come alone." Under the moonlight, the old Texas warehouses looked like a ghostly place. I walked over broken glass and weeds, looking for number 17. The iron door of the warehouse opened with a creak, revealing a faint light inside. I pushed the door, and a cloud of dust greeted me. In the center, under a solitary light bulb, stood Alexander. Next to him, a small figure in a wheelchair. Elias. "You came!" Alexander's voice was hoarse. "I knew you would come." My gaze fixed on Elias. He was breathing weakly, pale. He was still alive. "He needs a doctor." I ran toward him, but Alexander stopped me. "Conditions first." He held up an envelope. "Here is the truth you are looking for. I want it in exchange for the shares of your company." Under the dim light, Alexander's eyes were sunken, his beard messy. The confident man was gone. Now he was a fugitive with a look of madness. What truth is worth my company? I feigned calmness, subtly dialing Tristan's number on my cell phone. The truth about Elias's birth. He opened the envelope and pulled out a yellowed paper. Do you know why his DNA matches yours? Because then, Alexander burst out laughing. His laughter echoed in the empty warehouse. Because he is not my son. He is your mother's son. He showed me the paper. I saw it clearly. It was a consent for an in vitro fertilization treatment from a fertility clinic. The signature was my mother's, Elvira Campos, the date, 1 month before her accident. Impossible. My voice trembled. Of course she didn't tell you, Alexander sneered. It was a secret. She wanted a son to remember your father, but she was too old, and no legal clinic would do it for her. So she looked for an illegal one. My mind raced. Then Elias is my half-brother. That's why the DNA. But why did you have him? I was managing the disaster of the Texas project. He swallowed. Your mother found out the truth and threatened to report everything. Then suddenly she said she was going abroad and left the child with me. She left him with you? The man who caused her husband's death? My voice sharpened. She asked me to. She said the child needed the best treatment, and only I could give it to him. A clumsy lie. I saw the hesitation in his eyes and understood. You forced her, didn't you? You blackmailed her with the child to keep her silent. Alexander did not deny it. It was a confession. My mother had not died in an accident. This man had pushed her to her death. Just then, we heard police sirens outside. Alexander's face hardened. He grabbed Elias. You called the police? Let him go. I lunged for the wheelchair. He needs to go to the hospital. In the struggle, the envelope fell to the floor and photos scattered. I saw one of them. My mother, holding a newborn baby, tired but with a happy smile, her last image in this world. Stop, police. The door broke down and several officers entered. Alexander let go of the chair and pulled out a small knife. Eleanor, you caused all this. He lunged at me. Bang! A shot. Alexander screamed and fell to the floor, bleeding from his right leg. Tristan was at the door, a smoking gun in his hand. Officer, it was in self-defense, he said calmly, running toward me. Are you okay? I shook my head and checked Elias's condition. The child was semi-conscious, burning with fever. An ambulance, call an ambulance. 1 month later, Elias's condition stabilized, and he was transferred to the best children's hospital in the city. The genetic test confirmed he was my half-brother, born to my mother at 48 through an illegal in vitro fertilization. Alexander was sentenced to 7 years in prison for negligent homicide and economic crimes. My mother-in-law sold everything to defend him, but ended up ruined and in a nursing home. Rumor has it that Juliet entered rehab for drug addiction, and I officially acquired the Montero Group and renamed it the Cat Valdivia Campos Group. The company refocused on medical technology and, thanks to my patents, quickly attracted investors. Madam President, the IPO celebration is scheduled for next Monday, my secretary told me. I nodded and stood by the window of my office, contemplating the city. 3 years. My life had completely changed since I found that box of condoms. The former wife of the vice president was now the president. The former housewife, the CEO of a company with over 300 employees. My phone rang. It was Tristan. Are you forgetting the celebration party tonight at 7? I smiled. How could I forget my greatest ally? The dinner was at the city's most luxurious restaurant. Tristan was more elegant than ever. After a few glasses of wine, he took a small box from his pocket. Eleanor. He took a deep breath. In these 3 years, I've seen you rise from the ashes, and every time I see you more... Tristan, I gently placed my hand on his. Don't open it. His expression hardened. I haven't said... I know what you're going to say, I smiled, but not now. I've just found myself again. I need a little more time to be alone. Tristan was silent for a moment. Then he nodded and put the box away. I understand, but I'll wait. As I walked him to the taxi, he suddenly turned around. Next week is the final hearing. A tenderness filled my gaze. The doctor says the bone marrow transplant was also a success. Arriving home, I quietly opened the door to Elias's room. He was already asleep. His small face looked peaceful under the lamplight. On the nightstand, there was a photo of us from the adoption day. Him in a small suit and me in a dress. Next to it, the photo of my mother with the baby. He was the other part of her she had left in this world. "Good night, little one," I whispered, kissing him on the forehead. "Tomorrow your older sister will take you to Disneyland." I went out onto the balcony. The night wind caressed my face. I remembered everything that had happened in the last 3 years: betrayal, revenge, discovery, and rebirth. From submissive wife to relentless CEO, from desperation to strength. The pain Alexander inflicted on me was, in the end, the catalyst that made me reborn. Tomorrow, the Valdivia Campos group would face new challenges, and I was more than ready.